Okay, well, welcome everyone. We have a great session here today on optimizing Canvas apps with Live Monitor and Test Studio. Our presenter today is Patrick O'Gorman, and he is a technology specialist for the Power Platform, and he serves our state and local government customers. We would like to provide an event today that respects all individuals. So we ask that everyone assist in providing a welcoming and safe environment. We do bring 3 of these sessions to our customers every month. So if you have a topic that you would like us to consider in our schedule, please go ahead and drop that in the chat so that we can consider it. And we are going to keep the lines muted today to minimize any distractions or background noise. We ask that you use the chat for questions during the session. We've got other specialists here available to answer those while Patrick's presenting. So go ahead and post your questions in the chat. If we have time at the end, we'll unmute the lines and open it up for live Q&A as well. And then lastly, I will be sending an email to you with the recording and the deck from today's presentation. That'll come from devictor@microsoft.com. If you don't wish to receive that in the future, go ahead and reply back to me and I'll take you off that list going forward. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Patrick. Thank you so much for bringing this great topic to us today and helping our customers get the value out of their BizApps investment, Patrick. Thank you.
You bet, Deb. Thank you. And hi, everybody. I thought it was funny, right? As we're getting started, one of my colleagues raised their hand, presumably on accident, and I was like, "Oh, great! Someone's got to try to throw me already right from the start." So, hopefully, you can see my screen. Deb, can you just verify that you can see my screen?
We have it, Patrick. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so today we are going to talk about Canvas apps, testing Canvas apps, making them more performant, using a couple of the built-in tools known as Live Monitor and Test Studio. If you've never used them before, don't worry. I'll show you where they are. I'll show you how to use them. They are very simple tools to get set up and start using. They can give you some great feedback, some great insight as to what your apps are doing behind the scenes. And it might not all make sense to you, when you first take a look at it, but I promise as you kind of whittle it down and look at, what's most important to you, it'll start making more and more sense, and you'll start to see, kind of the data that's being gathered that's meaningful for you, and what you can what you can use to better improve your Canvas app performance. So with that said, the first thing we're going to look at today is we're going to do a quick intro really quick. I know I didn't do an intro up front. My name is Patrick O'Gorman. I'm a senior technical specialist. I work primarily with low code, but I've been working with Dynamics for close to 20 years now. I started out doing .NET development out of college in the .com days. Husband of 23 years, 2 daughters, 18 and 16. Grew up in Houston, Texas. Now I'm living in New Braunfels. If you don't know where that is, you're not alone. It's about an hour south of Austin. Fun fact about me, my mother-in-law and my mom are roommates and our next door neighbors. So it's a long story. Hit me up on email if you'd like to hear it sometime. So our agenda for today, as mentioned, we're going to talk about Test Studio and we're going to talk about Live Monitor. Again, if you've never seen those before, they're easily accessible under your Advanced Tools menu when you're working on a Canvas app. Then we're going to follow things up with a demo. We're actually going to do a couple demos sprinkled in between our Test Studio and Live Monitor content. All right, so why do we test? There's lots of answers we might have here, and if you've got a great answer you want to post in the chat, please do. But I narrowed it down to these 3 as I thought about it, as I worked through the demo especially, and I'll tell you why. But number 1, app quality. How well are we constructing our apps? How well are we naming our components? A lot of people take that stuff for granted. I'm looking for another window here. Sorry, I'm going to pull up something here. But yeah, so in general, how clean and neat are our apps? That's an important thing. How well is our code commented? A lot of people say, hey, this is a low code platform. Why do we need to worry about comments and testing and performance? And there's as we'll see today, there's still things that you can do. They always say there's more than one way to do something, and there sure is. And some of those ways are more performant than others when you're dealing with Canvas apps. So app performance we mentioned, not only is it a performance issue, but it's a cost issue, right? We have costs in place for the more that you use, the more API calls, you have thresholds in place, and if you exceed those, obviously you need to look at increasing that capacity, and so there's cost implications there, and then of course defects, bugs. We've been dealing with those as long as we've been writing software, building software. Okay, so what is Test Studio? I've gone ahead and put a little, animated picture here for us to kind of look at. And so I'm not a big slide guy, so I figured this might be a little easier to talk through. You can see there on the left-hand side, I've got it outlined in red right now. Those are the steps. So those are the test case steps that are being executed. It'll restart here in a second. There we go. And then, of course, on the right is the actual execution environment. That's the app. That's what's being done. The steps that are being kind of stepped through on the left there. That's what's actually happening there on the right. And so you can see there that we can use Test Studio to manually set up those steps, like you can see right there, where I've got multiple steps using Power Effects, or we can also use the recorder, and we'll get into that in a second when we actually create one of these ourselves. There's a couple other things that I want us to be aware of. Tracing, we can implement tracing throughout our test cases. We can also implement assertions. Assertions are basically saying, hey, something needs to be true in order for this test to pass, and if it's not, the test is going to fail. And so we'll show you how to do that in here as well. So a couple terms I want you to be familiar with before we jump into the demo. We have our test cases. We have our test suites. Test cases make up our test suites. If you have a test suite with multiple test cases, which we'll see today, you can actually run those cases individually, or you can run the whole suite, and that suite will execute sequentially. We mentioned test assertions. You always want to include test assertions in your test cases. But then all of these bullets that you see, these are predefined variables. So, if you've ever worked with system variables in Azure DevOps or really any number of systems out there that have system variables, these are predefined variables that give us a lot of information about those test cases, the test suites, what's going on with the execution of that test case, so that we can take that information and store it somewhere if we'd like. And I'll show you how to do that today. All right, so now we're going to jump into a demo. Before we do, any questions about Test Studio, anything that we just covered? Okay. All right, so you should be looking at my Canvas app now. If not, just interrupt me, please. Over here on the left-hand side, if you're not familiar with the Maker Studio, this is the Power Platform Maker Studio. I have opened up this Canvas app called the Demo Delegation app. It's a very simple app. It basically pulls data from both Dataverse and SharePoint. I'm going to go ahead, and if I hadn't already clicked on this, I could click on these three dots down here, and I could pull up my advanced tools. Once those are pulled up, you can see here that I have Live Monitor and I have tests. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open tests. So one of the nice things about your test studios, your test suites, I should say, are that they're portable. They move around with your app. So because I'm already in the Maker Studio, I've already got this app open. That should be a little bit of an indication to you that these test suites, the test suite here that I opened up, it goes around, it gets moved around with my app. So I can deploy this from dev to test, from test to prod. I can take samples, data set samples, and run those through these tests and just make sure everything behaves as I would expect it to in each one of those environments. So really nice feature. It's not something separate that you have to package up in another solution or anything. It's right there inside of your app package. So you can see here that I've got a couple suites here. I've got my add and update contact records, and then I've got this validate functionality suite. Within this first suite here, I've got add new contact. I've got edit newly added contact. So what our test is going to do, if we take a look at that, this is the add new contact test. And so you can see here that it's going to go in and do a set. If you're not familiar with Power Effects, that's okay. Most of these are pretty straightforward. You've got a set command here, which is basically setting a variable. It's going to set this variable contacts before test. We've got a trace command here, and trace is kind of like I don't know how many old school web developers we have on the call, but back in the day we used to do response.writes, and we didn't have really sophisticated debugging tools, and so you would see JavaScript code littered with response.writes, and it was basically our way of being able to analyze what the value of a variable was in the execution of our code. And so a trace is kind of similar to that. We're saying, hey, write out this message here, contacts before test, and then, use that variable. I want to know how many contacts are in my system before this test was run. Okay, so then some very simple stuff. Anytime you see set property, I'm actually setting the value of a visual a user interface component, in this case a text box named text first name, and then you can see we go through and we do that on a few different text boxes. Ultimately another trace, and then an assertion, and we ultimately want to make sure that the contacts count after we added a contact is one more than the contact count was before we added the contact. If it's not, we know something went wrong. All right, so that's our first our first test case here. And so we can run that by itself, or we can run that with the entire suite there, the entire add and update contacts record suite. The second test case in here is simply opening up that row that we just added and changing the job title to a different job title. So we're going to go ahead and run that as an entire suite. And you can see if I click on it at the suite level, it actually lists the two cases here together sequentially. One other thing I want to show before we move on is if I come in here and I click on test here, you can see those events we were talking about: on test case start, on test case complete, and on test suite complete. And if you remember that slide, the slide that had the different I call them system variables, drawing a blank there, the system variables, the predefined variables, that's where this comes in. And you can see here that I'm actually using the predefined variable test case info, test case result, test suite result. So I'm using those predefined variables, predefined objects, to get information about the specific stage of the test case that I'm in. And I write those using a patch command. Again, this is just straight Power Effects that you could write in your Canvas apps, directly in your Canvas apps. But I'm using a patch command to log that information to a dataverse table. And we'll check that out here in a second. Finally, what you'll notice in on test suite complete is I have this here, right here, Office 365 Outlook send email. You can add connectors. You can use, let me rephrase that. You can leverage connectors in these event handlers that are referenced in your app. So if I hadn't added the Office 365 Outlook connector to my app, I wouldn't be able to use it in this event handler on test suite complete. But because I could close this window, go back out to my data pane, and I could add that connector, and then all of a sudden I've got access to all its functionality. So that's the other really nice thing about having these test cases, test suites, bundled up with the app package itself, because you have access to all the connectors that the app has access to. Okay, so we should get an email when that test suite is complete. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. It's going to ask us to publish it. kind of a pain. Anytime you make even the littlest of changes, the smallest of changes, it's going to ask you to publish it first. So we're going to go ahead and publish it though, and watch what happens once it's done publishing. Let's hope it doesn't take too much longer here. There we go. So now you can see what we were seeing in the PowerPoint slide there. It's running the app in the player. Kind of hard to see exactly where it's clicking around and on some of these steps, but it actually is clicking the new icon. It's loading up the new contact form. It's entering in some values for those 5 fields. And if you're wondering why there's 2 save buttons, that will become apparent in the next part of our presentation here today. The new UX technique. All right, so you can see the first one is done, and it's gone into the second one where we're actually editing it, and it looks like that is done. Oh, almost. On test suite complete. So now the on test suite complete is done as well. So we can click done here, and we can see here that this was all successful. Everything was good. And I will take you over to my model-driven app. Let me move my Teams bar here. I mentioned that I wrote this data to a model-driven app. And so you can see here that this is the data that I've written to my model-driven app. It was just created. 1:17 p.m. should be about right. Yep, 1:17 p.m. So you can double click into that stuff. Doesn't look like I'm capturing a whole lot on that one, but anywhere you have trace messages, you can log the trace messages. You can see here where we're actually capturing that contact before test, contacts after test, etc. Anyway, just a really handy way to capture that data, send that data around. I don't know why I didn't get an email. Maybe I just need to refresh here. I should have gotten an email. Oh, there we go, 1:17 p.m. Basically, Canvas app testing complete, telling me that there was a testing that was completed. Looks like it passed, no failures. Great. Okay. So, let's see where our time is. We've got time. So one thing I wanted to do was just show you how easy it is to create. Let's go in here and we're going to create a new test. We'll just go ahead and close that easier. All right. So let's do this. We're going to say new suite, and we're going to just say, we'll rename this to add another contact and we'll change this. Okay, so as I mentioned, right now we're starting out with nothing. So as I mentioned, you've got a couple different ways you can start out. You can start out by simply entering in power effects into your actions, and then adding, continuing to add actions and adding your power effects, or you can do record. And so because record is way cooler, we're going to go ahead and do record. So I'm going to click record. Okay, it's loading everything up. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click my new button. It's going to load up my new form. I want to say Patrick Gorman, manager, 123 main, and we'll be in Houston. Okay, go ahead and click save. All right, so it's added my record. I can click done. And then if I wanted to test that, you can see here, it's all the steps that I just did. And if I wanted to test that, I could certainly come up here and push play. Of course, it's going to make me publish it. And the good thing is that you can use the events, the 3 events that I showed you, like the test case start. You can use that to execute a certain screen's on visible property, or maybe even the app start property, and set up your data, set up some collections there with whatever test data you want, and then you can use that test data throughout the test cases. So it really doesn't have to be as, as simple as what we're doing here, where we're actually just opening the UI and recording, recording the exact data that and using the exact data that we put into the UI. You can actually preload that in one of those events that I showed you. All right, so pretty simple. And I think that is it for Test Studio. Any questions about Test Studio before we move back to cover some live monitor stuff? Hopefully this is making sense, and anybody who's maybe worked in testing tools, especially user interface type testing tools in the past, this is probably pretty familiar to you. It's not quite as robust as some of the tools we've used in the past, but it is built on some of the same technologies, and it's getting there. It's getting better all the time. So.
Patrick, we're getting most of the questions answered in the chat, but we've got a couple here.
Awesome.
Does this testing presentation apply to model-driven apps and Power Pages?
It does not. We are specifically focused on Canvas apps today. You can use Live Monitor on a model-driven app, but we're just looking at Canvas apps today. And I don't think you can use Test Studio on model-driven apps, but I know you can use Live Monitor.
Okay, we got a thumbs up that is correct. And then there's another question, where were assertions specified?
Oh, good call. So let me open that back up and let me actually show you open test. Good call. Sorry about that. All right, so I will open up this test, this validation functionality suite. And so in this validation functionality suite, here's what else is really cool about this being able to use Power Effects in here is I can use things like regular expressions to validate my data that's being inputted into the app. So you can see here that I've got a basically an email address, and it's setting that email address to pg@microsoft.com. No dot in there, but let's go ahead and put a dot in there. And okay, and so then we'll go ahead and run this. And it always takes a little longer on that first run, but it's almost like the old days where once it's compiled, it just keeps running. It runs more quickly. So, but you can see here, this is going to open up a really ugly screen. Please pay no mind to the ugliness of this screen. But you can see here that I've entered in the correct, valid email address. We'll say done. And it looks good. So no problems there. But now if we change this, to say, we had some test data coming in and we got something that looked like this. Oh, I don't know why it did not update it correctly there. Hold on 1 second. Let's see here. That should have. Let's try this. Let's just do this just to mess it up really good here. Maybe save it first. Yeah, it didn't ask me to publish it last time, which was a little odd. Normally it asks me to publish it every time I make a change. And so the good thing is that it will not only make the test fail, but then you can grab that information and you can use that in those events where you can send out a notification that the test failed and any other information that you need. So you can see here the assertion that says failed, the test failed, assert with the following message. Well, that's my horrible error message creating there. So you can see here. I just put failed there. I could have put something more meaningful like the expected result was this and this was the actual result or something like that. But assertions are going to raise errors. They're also going to basically break that test case. So hopefully that answered your question. Move on, and hopefully it did. But if not, let us know and we'll do our best to answer it. give you a little more detail. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides, and we were going to talk. Well, let's just, what we just looked at with Test Studio. We were able to go in there and look at some pre-built tests that I had already configured. We created a new one. We looked at email validation with the assertion. We looked at adding a new row. We looked at editing that row. Um, some good information there that's captured or that's displayed there in Test Studio. So I think the big thing is it's really easy to kind of play with something. You're building Power Apps. Maybe you're building some kind of one-off or two-off Power Apps, and you haven't really gotten neck deep in it yet. And so it's like, all right, do I really need Test Studio? You might not. It really depends on the app. But as your apps get bigger, or a specific app maybe you're working on gets bigger, you'll thank yourself that you started, building those test cases early on, because it's really easy to lose track of functionality as apps get bigger. And then the other thing I've mentioned a few times now, test suites are distributed with the app, so it's really easy for someone to take your solution, take your app, deploy it to their environment, and test as to whether or not they're getting the expected behavior. So, all right. Live Monitor. Live Monitor is one of my favorite tools on the platform, besides obviously the platform itself. I was a big fan of Fiddler. If you've been writing code or anything for any amount of time, you probably know what Fiddler is. This is kind of like Fiddler Lite. It certainly is not as robust, but it gives you a lot of really good information. And one thing that people have told me is, they're like, okay, this is great information. It helps me kind of, see maybe where my bottlenecks are, see how chatty my app is. If I've got a timer going on some screen that I've forgotten about, just whatever, little things that your app may be doing that you don't know about, or things that you might be able to do better. Because let's face it, this is a low-code platform, but PowerFX is hardly simple. There's certainly some things to PowerFX that you need to know about in order to write the best code that you can for your apps. And so that's where Live Monitor comes in. If you look at my screen, what's kind of going through there on the left-hand side, pretty simple. This is kind of my analyze in real time slide. On the right-hand slide, just like before, you can see I'm clicking through the user interface, changing some things, adding a new contact, what have you. And you can see all of that network activity and really just the whole UX, experience, all of that activity, my clicks and whatnot. All of that is getting logged and displayed in my live monitor window there. Just kind of talked about that. All right. So one of the things I love about Live Monitor is it's contextual in the sense that your right hand window is contextual to your left, I should say. Depending on what type of operation you've selected, you can see right now I've got a get rows operation selected. I can drill down into that operation, and you can see I've got 4 different tabs over there: details, formula, request, response. I can look at the formula that gave me that data. Then I can look at the data. So super powerful. You just noticed there I highlighted an error. And I did this one for my SharePoint peeps, error when trying to get data from the network because it exceeds the list view threshold. Sorry, couldn't resist. You'll see lots of that if you're using SharePoint as a backend. Here you can see I've got a delegation warning, and I'm showing, using the system ID field for a SharePoint list. That's not a delegable field. So I really love that you can, you get that whole list of things that are going on in your app, and then you can drill down not only into the details, which we saw a second ago with a lot of that JSON, but also into the actual PowerFX data, and then obviously in this case of get rows, the actual data itself. So. Really, really cool stuff. Really helpful. And so we'll get to my favorite part about it. It's great for troubleshooting. It's great for performance, etc. I'll go ahead and lay it out there now. That my favorite thing about it is, as I mentioned, PowerFX. There's lots of different ways you can do things. And if you've ever seen my delegation demo where I cover lots of different delegable type things like operators and expressions and data types, etc., data sources, obviously, there's always more than one way to do something, and sometimes you can skirt around delegation issues by using another PowerFX command. Um, I love that you can make your apps more performant the same way. If you're not using certain things like the with command or the concurrent command, you should, and you should use live monitor to help you figure out whether or not, the juice is worth the squeeze. All right. So finally, my favorite thing about Live Monitor, I've also got a list of shortcomings for these two tools. So don't think I'm just sitting here, trying to church them up too much. But they are great tools. Don't get me wrong. But for Live Monitor, being able to collaborate, I can go in on the right hand side. You can see there, I'm going in there. I'm starting off a debug session. I want to invite someone to that session. I can do that. And so on the left hand side, I've got a different persona logged in. It's one of my other user accounts. I can bring that up and share that log with that person, and they can in real time, see what I'm doing, see what, the metrics are that I'm capturing, the times and everything. So really nice. For me, it always begs the question, why wouldn't I just screen share with her or him and do it that way? They can't actually see my app. They can just see the logs. So anyway, I guess just like the pipelines app, if you've ever used that, there's still work to do, but it gets better all the time. So I have no doubt that Live Monitor and Test Studio are going to keep getting better. So with that said, let's any questions before we jump into a demo of Live Monitor? Take that as a no.
We have one question here. Can you change variable while testing like Visual Studio? Oh, can your change variable while testing like Visual Studio?
Let me see if I understand this correctly. So in Visual Studio, you can have a breakpoint in your code, and you can pause your code execution on that breakpoint, and you can actually change the value of a variable in your command window in Visual Studio so that the code may execute differently based on that change. Or is that what's being asked? Can we change the value of those variables during the execution of that test case? If so,
That sounds like what it is.
if so, the answer is, I believe the answer is no, but that would be really cool. It would be really cool to just be able to put breakpoints in there and be able to analyze your values like you can in Visual Studio at a breakpoint. But that's unless I'm missing something, that's not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that was also my interpretation, Patrick, and I agree with your answer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then we have another question. Can you run live monitoring? Oh, I think we've got the answer here already. We put it in the chat. We're good. You keep going,
Sweet.
Patrick.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so now we'll open up Live Monitor, and give me a minute because it opens up in another window. So I'm going to do a little window moving around here. I think that's right. Okay, cool. This should be right. I'm going to close this, close my properties, make this a little bit bigger. Okay. All right. So we have our live monitor session over there on the left. And so some of the more common things that we'll do here is, we'll do something like a search. We'll come in here, and actually it helps if I run the app, and we'll search, and we'll do Fulvia. She's one of my favorite test users, or test pieces of data, whatever. Okay, so you can see there that we've got Fulvia coming back on both our SharePoint and our Dataverse table. And if we want, we can look over here, and you can see it looks like I did 14 different things were logged. You kind of go through these. They make sense. I selected something in my user interface. I started doing get rows. One thing I will point out is, and I didn't really think about how to put this into the demo, so bear with me here. But if you've ever worked with a data table or a gallery control on a Canvas app, you have what's known as the items property. And so, and I think everyone should be able to understand this. My data source is set to my items property, or rather my items property is set to my data source. So what does that mean? That means with every keystroke into that text box, into that search box, I'm doing a lookup. So that's why this app seems so chatty. So what's the alternative to that? The alternative is to type in the whole name, in this case, Fulvia, and then having a search button off to the right where I click that search button and I execute one command. But because I'm doing it on every keystroke, if I delete that, watch what happens over here on the left. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out so we can start fresh. If I type in an F, type in a U, L. Anyway, you get the point. It's very chatty. So keep that in mind. Right away, I'm saying to myself, dang, this is pretty chatty. Maybe I should consider putting a search button and not having the search execute on every single keystroke. Just something to consider. We know that the not equals operator with the and is not delegable, so we should be able to click on it. Sorry if you missed that, but what I wanted to show was this. So when I run a query, this query, last name, I want all the employees or contacts where last name is not equal to Zanichi, but still starts with the letter Z. Well, unbelievably, string types in SharePoint are not delegable when using the not equal to operator. That's why you only get 3 records back in SharePoint. That said, in Live Monitor, we can see this delegation warning here, and we can click on that. And here's where it really gets cool. I can pull this out, and I think we might have to click on the other one, but excuse me. If I click on this filter here, I can drill into this. I can see, I can take a look at my data. This is, I don't know if it's got there it is. Okay, let me maximize this. So I can also, for my delegation, I can click on the formula tab and I can see exactly which formula is causing the problem. Now, you may not know why that's a problem, but at least you know where to start, and you can go dig in and say, okay, well, why is this not delegable? Why am I getting a delegation warning? The same thing with any of these. I thought I saw an error pop up in here, but maybe not. Okay, so pretty straightforward, but where it really gets interesting, in my opinion, is, let me start over here. Okay, so I come back in here and I go to Advanced Tools and I open my Live Monitor. We talked about how to write performant code. And yes, like I said, it's a low code, no code platform, but I've yet to see a Canvas app that didn't require a decent amount of PowerFX code. And for the most part, PowerFX code is really simple to write, especially with all the good resources we have out there. For learning it. Oh, well, that's not going to play nice. Sorry, I'm messing my windows. One more second here. There we go. Okay, so last thing I want to show is this. And so if I run this app and I go over to my uber ugly harness screen here, you'll see a couple of different boxes here. This first one is called bulk load 10 employees. The second one is called concurrent versus not. Okay, so let's start with bulk load 10 employees. Both of these buttons are going to do the exact same thing. They're going to bulk load 10 employees. They're just going to do it slightly differently with regard to the PowerFX code. So let's look at for all first. So if I click for all, I think it's done. 43 things, 43 different things, half of those being network operations, half of those being network calls. And those eat away your API calls. That's network. It's bandwidth congestion. So let's clear that, and now let's just do the collect. Ten rows, 16 rows. Looks like, oh, hold on, 13. I don't know what this is. Looks like 13. I'm not sure where 16 came from, but you can see here. It's much more efficient, much more efficient. I apologize we didn't look at the times on these, but if we would have looked at the times between the last execution we did with the for all and the execution we just did with the collect, it's going to be noticeably different. And so if we go in and we look at the Power Effects code for this, we look at the for all, and you can see here, I'm basically creating this collection of people. No big deal. I do the exact same thing in the other call. But then I do this collect. Sorry, that's the collect. So this is the second button. This is the collect button. This is all I'm doing, is doing a collect. On the for all, I'm actually doing a for all loop where I'm looping through and doing a patch. So it's executing a patch for every time we go through that loop. Obviously, there's more to it than that. If you dug into all 43 of those, those line items that got logged, quite a bit going on there. But that's a great example of, hey, maybe you should consider writing this Power Effects code a different way. And the same goes with this one. Let's take a look at this last example here, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. So this is concurrent versus not concurrent. If you're not familiar with the concurrent Power Effects function, the concurrent Power Effects function enables you to make multiple calls simultaneously. So let's say when your app's loading up, you need to load up 3 or 4 different data sets into collections so that you have them readily available inside of your app. If you do all of those in separate, collect calls, it's going to go collect 1, collect 2, collect 3, collect 4, and it's going to take however amount of time it takes to do those sequentially. If you wrap those 4 collect calls in what's known as a concurrent statement, it's going to execute all of those at once. And so this one's a little harder to tell because I don't have any really, I don't have a ton of data for us to work with, but let's just check it out here. So if we run non-concurrent, and we should be able to look over here at the live monitor side and see what's going on. Looks like it's done. Yeah, it looks like roughly 3 seconds. We'll round it. We'll just round it to 3. Now, if I do the same thing with the concurrent, I think that's done because it only normally logs 2 or 3 clear collects. And so you can see there it was, less than a second, less than even a fraction of a second. I've actually seen it as high as like a quarter of a second was as slow as I've seen it, I should say. So again, knowing the differences between how Power Effects commands execute, like I just showed you with using the concurrent or using the collect versus the for all, those things can drastically impact the performance of your Canvas apps. So I hope that was useful. I'm here until the end of the hour for questions and answers, but yeah, that's all I've got. So Deb, I guess I'll turn it back over to you other than Q&A.